What does it mean to be called crazy in a crazy world? Listen to Madness Radio, voices and visions from outside mental health. Welcome to Madness Radio. This is your host, Will Hall, and I'm here with my co-host and dear friend and colleague, Oryx Cohen. Great to see you, Oryx.
It's so great to see you, Will. It's been too long since we've done something like this, and I'm really excited to be co-hosting Madness Radio with you.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's been too long, and I want to remind folks that I think I interviewed you twice on Madness Radio. So people, today we're co-hosting, but if people are interested in your story and finding out more, they should check out a couple of the old Madness Radio shows that we did about you. And today I'm very interested because we have a guest that is a colleague and friend of yours, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce her. So today on Madness Radio, our guest is Felicity Krueger. Felicity is a mental health survivor who works for Youth Move Kentucky and is a trainer for emotional CPR. Felicity helped develop the youth curriculum for eCPR. She recently won the Alternatives Youth Leadership Award. So welcome to Madness Radio, Felicity Krueger.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Maybe we should start by just what is Youth Move Kentucky for people who don't, or Youth Move, is it a national organization?
So MOVE stands for Motivating Others Through Voices of Experience. It's for young people to get involved with mental health, whether it be through their own story, and create this way of ending stigma through each other and through leadership and empowerment.
So is this a pharma front group, or is this like legit youth voices?
Legit youth voices.
Okay,
Everybody is young people, run by young people.
Oh, it's peer run. It's run by the youth.
Yes.
And I can back that up. It's amazing organization that I've had the privilege of collaborating with for several years now. So yeah, Youth Move is the real deal.
And I know that the kind of like the leading crisis tool out there is something called mental health first aid, which is pretty terrible from my perspective. And eCPR, which is emotional CPR, is sort of the alternative empowerment, I would say, oriented, rather than just assess someone and then call 911. Is that?
I had taken both of these trainings within like 6 months of each other, and another one called QPR. I could not tell you what the anagram is for that.
Yeah, question, persuade, respond.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds like an interrogation tool.
It's not another not great one, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree to that. So I took them so close to each other so I could really evaluate them, which was on a complete accident. Emotional CPR was so human oriented, not this like, well, time to refer you or get you done and go to the next mental health hospital or get you on this new drug to quote unquote fix you. It was more of, we're going to be with you through your decisions, and this is all on you, and we're just going to be here to support you and what you need to do.
That was why I became an eCPR trainer. I think Dina Tyler is an eCPR trainer. So, but again, it has that obstacle because it's peer controlled and really about empowerment. It doesn't, for some reason, some strange reason, it doesn't get the money and support as something like mental health first aid. I wonder why that might be. Is that still true, Oryx, that eCPR is still kind of like a bit less known?
Oh yeah. It's very true. And if folks don't know, I recently became the CEO of the National Empowerment Center. I was the COO for several years, and emotional CPR is the National Empowerment Center's core training. So Will, you're right. It's very difficult to get kind of mainstream support or political support for emotional CPR and for alternatives of a lot of different kinds, because we're not in bed with the pharmaceutical industry or big hospital money or insurance companies. So it's difficult, and folks don't necessarily listen to those with lived experience. We're trying to make some inroads in those areas, and there's some good signs. Well, I think we're in a better place than we've ever been in terms of getting this out there more and more. But yeah, we haven't been able to like get emotional CPR put into legislation, for example, which is mental health first aid is all over the place in legislation. Like a bill passes that says we're spending millions of dollars on mental health first aid. That's somewhere where we're trying to go, but you're right. There's a lot of obstacles to get there.
So Felicity, what is it about the youth curriculum that you helped develop that makes eCPR specifically useful for youth?
So one of my favorite things that they did was it was created for youth by youth. So we got to hear only youth perspectives with like maybe one or two adults, which was amazing, first off. But we took all of their input of like things that they wanted, which included mine. And it was, we want more breaks or we want less time. It's inconvenient for it to be a 5 hour class 2 times a day when we have school every day and that we have to go to. And it's kind of annoying to do this on a weekend when we want to go out and be teenagers and do teenager things. And we incorporated more tactile things like a fully formed journal with coloring pages and prompts and just so that it was a bit more interactive, which was something that a lot of us really pushed for because it's really, we did not want it to feel like school, like we're going from school to more school at night after these doing it all day. We want this to be kind of fun and interactive while also being able to learn and fully form ideas and thoughts around it.
I guess we forgot to mention you're 19, is that right?
Yes.
And you've been training other teenagers and youth in eCPR?
Yes, I think I became a trainer when I was, and Oryx, correct me if I'm wrong, 17 or 18, around that.
Yeah, I think it was 17.
Can you encapsulate what eCPR is, like for someone who doesn't even know what it is?
It's talking heart to heart, person to person, being there for another human being without judging, fixing, or healing, which is literally from the book, but I think it represents it well. And just a way to better communicate with other people and other human beings.
And so you've been involved in advocacy since you were even before you were a teenager, since I think you were saying since you were 11. Like tell us about that.
Yes. So my older brother was diagnosed with autism, which my mom, if you know Miss Maggie Krueger, she is a powerful, undeniable, I do what I want type of woman. So she got involved, and I was her homeschooled 11-year-old kid who followed her as she went to the Capitol with her signs and buttons saying we shouldn't criminalize young people with autism as much as we do.
Criminalize in what sense?
A lot of kids with autism, there is sort of a lack of knowledge. If they do something bad, they end up in the juvenile justice system just like every other kid does, but they aren't given adequate help or services. They just describe them as this is just a behavior that they do because they want to be bad instead of like, let's get them some help or therapy or coping skills. And it wasn't a law until recently to provide that in the state of Kentucky until around 2016-ish, I think.
So was that when you became an advocate, seeing your mom do this work for her son, your brother?
Definitely was the light of the ignition that started that. Officially, I started doing my work at 14 when they let me.
What kind of advocacy stuff were you doing? Were you going with your mom to the Capitol and that kind of thing?
That, yeah, I started following her to the Capitol at 11, and then 14 was my first council that I was allowed to be on, because age limits are weird. So I was on Kentucky Youth Move, which is the one of the subsets of Youth Move National. That was just like a bunch of young people getting together, discussing how to end mental health stigma in the state of Kentucky.
This wasn't like your mom forcing you to do it, or no allowance for you if you don't help me, and this kind of thing. It was not an exploitation thing, right?
Definitely not. I found it so interesting and compelling of like, yeah, we help people. That's what we do as human beings. So why not do it all the time? I also have always been that kid who like, let me go talk to this random child in the corner who doesn't have any friends. So it was just like, I get to do that all the time. That's awesome.
So it really came naturally to you.
Yeah, I was always just that kid, and it always made sense for me. My mom says that we raise girls with a lot of loudmouth in our genes, which is funny because my father and brother were always the quiet types, so us girls were the ones that were making sure that they had friends.
So you're adopted, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So did you want to talk about that experience at all? Of, even maybe younger, when you were younger, before you were adopted, and the experience of finding this new family.
Yeah, so I was adopted at age 2. So there's a bit of like somewhat memory, somewhat not, sort of that they call it prenatal trauma, I think, because it happens while you're in utero and that kind of thing. Fun fact, you can experience trauma before you're even born. Quite interesting. But I had contact with my bio mom and was tossed around the system for 2 years before I was adopted and landed with my family. My mom, my dad, and had visitation rights with my bio mom until I was about 13, which never really was the best situation, but it was everybody trying to provide what they thought was the best situation up until I was able to voice it and be listened to. I always had this discussion because I'm Hispanic and Native American. And my mother is Irish and looks Irish. That was always the biggest struggle of like, why don't you look like your mom? It also does not help she is 76 years old right now. So always was like, yeah, that's your grandma. Nope, that's just my mom.
So it's a really non-traditional situation that you got a lot of questions and people maybe saw you as different, or how does this fit together?
Yeah, I was always sort of an odd kid. But I was always the different kid and the kid who came in and had to sort of explain, "Oh, I've got technically 2 moms, but this one's my real one. And this one is the one that gave birth to me." And it caused a lot of anxiety and a lot of nervousness. I got diagnosed with an anxiety disorder at 9, which is so young, but it was so apparent. And I had so much fear of just kind of doing normal things that every other kid could do, which was like the beginning of my mental health journey was just crippling anxiety at such a young age.
So they diagnosed you, and then what happened when they diagnosed you? How did that start your mental health journey?
So my mom does not believe in medicating children before the age of 15, and even that she gets a little like worried about. So it became a series of how do we cope? How do we get better without going to what everybody else is telling us to do, medications immediately? So it was a lot of like sitting and talking to each other and like learning to voice my opinions, which was a little difficult at first. I was a loudmouth, but not when it came to myself. I hated talking about things that I struggled with. So I had to really learn and really sit down and like think about that at a young age and be like, you need help in this moment.
Well, can I say that I think it really paid off because a lot of young people go that other route where they're given a diagnosis and they're given a ton of meds, and they don't have that opportunity to try to process it, to try to talk about it, to try to understand it. And so I see a lot of young people's development, maturity, that type of development stunted because of the mental health system, really, and how it does not encourage anybody really, but especially youth to understand what's going on, to take control of what's going on. And I think that has probably paid a big difference in terms of how you're able to do all these great leadership things and have the awareness that you have and the maturity that you have at such a young age. And that's awesome that your mom was able to do that for you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And I think for me, it was never the right choice. I've got a lot of addiction in my family already, in my biological family. So it was like, do I want to be reliant on medication? And that was something I discussed at 13 too. Is this something that I should be relying on? And no hate to anybody who does or who does take medication, but it is something that I personally was never fully comfortable with. And I'm glad I got the choice.
So you are adopted at age 2. You have a lot of like trauma from even before you were born. You're brought into this family. You have a lot of anxiety, so much that they're saying you've got a disorder, you need meds, and your mom is saying no, no, let's do something different. How did you deal with the anxiety? Was it really about just talking? Was that really what made the difference?
For me, it did. And then it was also getting comfortable within myself of understanding who I was and what I needed and meeting other young people who were older than me at the time and looking up to them as like, this is another person that I know that can tell me exactly what they've gone through and I can relate to that. And it can be something so influential in young people's lives as having that one person that knows what's going on and it could sit there with you for several hours and be like, me too.
Were these just young people that you met through school, or was it through some organization or through your mom, or how did you get in touch with your peers to get a chance to talk about mental health stuff?
Mostly Girl Scout camp.
Girl Scout camp. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Another wellness tool we hadn't discussed yet. Girl Scout camp. So you went to Girl Scout camp and you found other girls that were you talked about anxiety in.
Yeah.
Did some of them say, "Oh, you got to take meds. I take meds," and was there pressure to sort of see it that way?
I think with at least the group that I found, it was always intrigue in other people of like, wow, that's something you do. That's really cool. Here's what I do. Let's compare and contrast. But it was never, you should do the same as I. It was, that's cool. Here's how I do it. And here's things that co-align with how you do it and how we can integrate into each other's lives throughout similarities instead of the differences.
Wow, that's amazing. That sounds like emotional CPR right there.
Just gonna
That's
say
great.
the Girl Scouts are sounding pretty progressive
Yeah.
there on the support group. So then when did you start getting involved with Youth Move, and how did you kind of end up being the winner of the Youth Leadership Award? How did that all happen? If I got the timeline straight there.
And I'm gonna shout out Oryx right now because I love him. He's amazing. Um, he really believed in me, which is amazing.
Mm.
It's nice to have someone other than your mom believe in you. Um,
I'd settle for just my mom believing in me. But actually, that's not true. My mom is great if she's listening right now.
yeah. I got a call one day about doing another training, which I'm always down for. I love training. It's so fun. Um,
Why do you like sound? It sounds training sound terrible. What do you love about it?
you get to meet so many people with so many perspectives, and you get to help them understand not only themselves a little bit better, but other people better, other ways of communicating. You get to see the interaction that they have grow throughout the week. We've done trainings with juvenile justice workers who come in quiet. They aren't going to talk and leave thinking that they've really learned something and excited and talking and open. And it's like just that change of what one person can be like to the next day is impressive and amazing and beautiful. We had a youth training. We had a young person come in, kind of like gender identity crisis happening very within themselves, didn't really feel comfortable talking. Throughout the week, they made this like incredible switch where they were sitting there and they were the ones activating the conversations and excited and ready to bring this to their friends and people they knew, and having a lot of growth within themselves, which I am always excited for young people to come to terms with who they are and believe in themselves, which can be really hard when you're 15 and going to high school. That's one of my favorite things.
And can you talk a little bit about the difference of trainings that are done by youth trainers versus older adult trainers, and how that might make a difference?
Young people almost never want to go up to, like, I'll use me and Oryx for an example. Oryx is an older man. Right off the bat, I'm meeting Oryx for the first time. I wouldn't feel comfortable going to Oryx and let's have this deep, intimate conversation. I'd look for the other teenage girl in the room and be like, you're the one I'm going to have a conversation with immediately. I did a blog where I talked about this, so it's fun for me. Comparing to like my mom, who is 76. She didn't grow up with technology and everything being able to be clickable online within a minute, and she didn't have all the same pressures and things that I have grown up with. Like, for instance, COVID was a very big deal in the middle of my late teenage years, or like the middle teenage years. That's something she never had to experience. Everything wasn't on Zoom for her.
So just, yeah, that's really interesting to think about the social realities for young people today. I mean, social media is a big one. I've learned that there are some people who would not talk to me except on text. They want to text message me, like, oh, okay, let's do it on text. But what do you think are some of the big obstacles or forces that are hurting young people's mental health these days? Or what are the obstacles for kids being able to find themselves and their strength and their empowerment and their freedom?
It's really a double-edged sword because, especially with social media, it can cause such great revelations within yourself, but it can also tear you down completely, and having to mediate that within themselves. One of the things I do is I have a Instagram account. Shout myself out. Felicity is not okay if you want to follow it. Um, that I post all my fashion stuff on because I find that really fun. But I'm not gonna go sit there and focus, oh, today I only got 3 likes. I'm gonna be like, I looked great in this outfit and it was fun for me to put together and edit the photos and empower myself through that. And maybe if I do that, another young girl or young person will see that and be like, you know what I'm gonna do? Today I'm gonna wear a cool outfit and I'm gonna post it and I'm not gonna care about it other than this is just out in the world now for funsies, and empowering myself in that way. We have a tendency to focus on immediately getting diagnosis and getting help and going to hospitals or counselors' offices and talking about it as being a mental health problem, not a person with mental health, which I think has always been an apparent thing, but it's different now. It's changed. We aren't criminalizing it anymore. That's good. But we still treat people with mental health problems like a problem, especially in suicide prevention. From my own personal experience, we had a young person when I was in middle school die by suicide. And it was just this vague thing that we weren't supposed to talk about, but we were all supposed to know that this happened, but don't talk about it. It's taboo. We aren't gonna involve ourselves in this. But if you're feeling this way, you need to come and talk to this random doctor that we found immediately, instead of like, let's talk about this as a group. Let's openly communicate. Let's say, yes, this horrible thing happened. How do we continue on with life?
Was that part of your work then with Youth Move Kentucky and also the ECPR to, with other teenagers, talk about suicidal feelings and the things that they're going through? I imagine it is, yeah.
100%. Yes, that is one of the things we do talk about. And emotional CPR is that suicide aspect. Because I can tell you, like, I've currently got friends over. I know for a fact every single one of them has either been around suicide or like the idea of it, or had ideation themselves. And we sort of create a space in one of the days of the training that's just, here's this traumatic thing that we've all experienced, whether it be ourselves or through another person. Let's open up a conversation, and just having that a space to be able to do that. And I have talked about it. I think we need better suicide prevention in schools so badly, and that is something I really want to work towards and create something that we can have a goal set for.
I agree 100%. But what would you say to someone that says, "Well, wait a second, you can't just start talking about suicidal feelings or suicidal ideation. The people are it's gonna promote suicide. People are gonna start being triggered. They're gonna start. It makes them more likely to kill themselves. And what we need is actually to just be assessing and then getting people the help that they need." What would you say to someone who takes that more fearful approach? Because it's quite a very different approach to youth suicide prevention you're describing.
I would say that youth are already talking about it. It's being talked about behind closed doors, which is creating toxic things. Like, I don't know, my young people will get this. This is another one of those things that older people might not get. Tumblr in 2014 was just a mess of young people talking about suicide, but it being hid behind closed doors, where they were just continuing doing toxic behaviors and promoting it towards each other, but it was never opened. And then it just ended up demonizing all of this and creating more rhythms and effects of suicide being in the framework and idea. It's just that nobody knew we were doing it until it was too late. Opening that conversation creates a safer space where not only do adults or people who know what they're doing know about it, but making sure that those toxic behaviors don't happen immediately.
Oh, so you're saying that young people are talking about their suicidal feelings with each other secretly on Tumblr and these other social media sites, and because there was no space for anyone to do it anywhere else. So let's create the spaces as it's happening already.
Yeah, exactly.
So what about the idea that I hear professionals talk about and the media talk about, the idea of a suicide contagion, or people also say like a cutting contagion or a bulimia anorexia contagion, that if teenagers tell each other about these behaviors, then they're going to spread because people are going to be copycatting each other. What would you say to that?
This idea that it's like a virus is so wild to me because it's not really true. It's more of a lack of like knowledge of like teaching young people how to cope, especially with suicide and cutting. It's just, there's been a door opened and everybody's looking at this door and it's still open, and they're saying, oh, we need to close that door. As for like eating disorders, if it's not being an open conversation, then they're just going to keep doing it, and providing help in a safe, reasonable way of, it's here if you need it. Let's open the conversation. So it's not a scary thing to just go out and say. In my personal experience, it was demonized after he died. It was, well, now we aren't going to talk about it. So if you're feeling this, that means you're kind of wrong. Instead of, this horrible bad thing happened, we should open this conversation, and it should be, how do you feel right now in this moment? Have you ever felt this way? I've felt this way.
So I'm throwing a lot of devil's advocate kind of questions at you, but what about someone who would say something like, well, do you really think that teenagers can by themselves create the spaces that are safe enough or that are well facilitated enough? Or don't you need like some grown-ups, adults, professionals, because I think that when we were doing a lot of similar kind of work with college students through the Icarus Project, we got a lot of pushback from, no, you can't, you're not going to make these places to go and talk on your own. We're going to demonize it. And if it's going to be talked about, there has to be a counselor present. It has to be part of the official system with professionals and assessment and all that. But it sounds like you're presenting a vision of, hey, let's train youth around the country to create these spaces, and they can do it as teenagers.
Exactly. I think all youth need to have the empowerment and knowledge to do it with themselves. And yeah, there probably should be, it depends on the age, really, and emotional capacity, because we all are at different stages of our life. But young people, once again, are already talking about it. Let's just give them the tools to talk about it safely.
What kind of pushback have you encountered? Do you try and do trainings or try and do outreach to certain schools or communities, and people say, no, 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 we're worried about liability, or wait a second, we'd rather have the social workers in here doing this?
I live in rural Kentucky, so always pushback. There's a lot of fear of, well, we should let professionals do it. Um, but then their professionals aren't necessarily trained as well in the correct ways.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
They're just guessing, man.
Yeah.
It's so new around here. They still are like wrapping their heads around this, that young people can even have mental health issues. So you get a lot of pushback, but you also get, like my family, for instance, these families who have been through it and have seen it, and they're coming firsthand of like, this is something we need. And I think sometimes those stories can wildly change mindsets and ideas, and it brings to the forefront of, well, this is what our youth are saying that we need. So maybe now we all can get on board and listen to our young people and find ways that we can do it. But pushback is always going to be a thing. I don't think there'll be ever a time when we do not get pushback, which is sad, but it's sort of life. There will be people who won't agree with everything you do, but finding the people who do is what's important.
Yeah, we've run into a few of those in our webinars and such. Could you say why you think they chose you to give you this national award for youth leadership?
I am still kind of like flustered by the fact that I won that. I think at the end of the day, I really am passionate about it. One of my life mottos is be the you that a younger you needed. And I think,
Be the you that the younger you needed.
yes,
Nice. Nice.
I love that quote so much. And I think in ways I have, or at least I've tried, and that's what's important at the end of the day, that there was an attempt made. I was sort of raised with the idea, and this comes from my mother also being the same type of way of, you help out no matter what. And as long as you're comfortable and safe in doing that, it's something that you just do. And I have the ability to do it because I have come from privilege and live in a house and am fed every day and have the opportunity to pick what I want to do for my life. And I'm very thankful for that. And I don't think a lot of people get that.
I'm thinking about also just how much change there's been since I was growing up, and there's a lot more questioning about capitalism and questioning about like, where's our society going? We're in a giant climate crisis. I mean, where are you at? Do you see the connections between, say, young people who are feeling suicidal, or the privilege issues and poverty, the connections there with larger social change that's needed? I mean, I know I was very excited about the Bernie Sanders campaign. I know a lot of young people. When I went to a couple of Bernie rallies, like tons of young people there. How do you see like the connections between working with individual mental health on these larger social political change issues?
I think that our youth are they're becoming more empowered somewhat by themselves throughout just life experience. But there's also a different way of thinking slowly coming out of the horizon of, we can do whatever we want, in the sense of like, we can think what we want, we can live what we want, and we can just discover life. I know a lot of young people who, including myself, who looked at college like, this is not something I need right now. I can do it. I'll probably be in debt for the rest of my life. And am I going to be in a job that is not something that's life fulfilling? And there's a lot more questioning that gets kind of global at the end of the day. It goes online. Bernie Sanders, for instance, as you said, had this amazing social media campaign where young people could see that even before they're 18. They can look at this at 13 and be like, look at all the stuff that he's doing, so we don't only see one side. We don't only see what our parents put on the TV. We can reach out and we can be like, cool, this person's doing that. I vibe with that, but I'm also going to look at this perspective of another person's doing this. I vibe with that too. How do they contrast? What are things that I don't like? What are things that I do? And that questioning is just so there that we are, as young people, just becoming so empowered within ourselves to make decisions.
Do you see that also the kind of fears about the future and hopelessness is behind a lot of mental health stuff? Because I know a lot of young people are thinking about their horizon as adults and situation with climate emergency, for example, or the incredibly chaotic political warfare situation that seems to be getting worse all the time. And are you seeing that as well? Is that your sense of things?
We have those thoughts, and that is one of the reasons why we are so empowered, because at the end of the day, it's like, we aren't just going to sit back and let this happen. We're going to hit it head on, and if we fail, at least we went down fighting. And this is a conversation I've been having with a close friend recently of like, what does the system look like? And do we want to sit down and just take it for the rest of our lives? If we make it to 80, will we be happy that we just sat down and was like, okay, we couldn't do anything, so we just didn't. And we both came to the senses of, at the end of the day, we're fighting. We're fighting in two very different ways, but we are fighting our own way, and we didn't just take it. We had those thoughts and we took them and we said, no.
Oh, that's so great. That gives me a sense of hope. It's really nice to hear that.
Yeah, me too, for sure. That's such a powerful place to be right now. So I don't know if I want to ask a different question. Did you have a follow-up question to that, Will? Or
Well, I have something we were talking earlier, and I kind of can't resist asking you, just because I think we're both fans of horror movies. And then you mentioned, oh yeah, ask me about horror movies. I mean, my name is F. Krueger. And I thought, oh, 80s. Okay, we're both down with 80s horror movies. But I mean, I don't know. I just thought I'd throw that out there if you have anything to say.
is it an outlet because life is a kind of a horror show right now? If you want to say anything about it.
You know what? It might be Oryx. But I think there's also, throughout horror movies, you see these people go through like the worst experiences, that, especially in ones with young teenagers, adults don't believe or they don't understand. And we see them come out of these events, like in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The last scene you see is her in the truck leaving after all of these awful things that she just experienced, in a way of like, I lived, I survived, I made it through it. Now time to continue my fight and go forth it. And we all look at these underdogs or these final girls, as you will, and we see ourselves in them, see somebody who just went through something awful, whether it be awful childhoods or just a bad breakup, and we go, well, if she can make it through that, I can live vicariously through her, and I can make it through whatever I just went through.
Yeah, that's a big theme in the Nightmare on Elm Street series. The teenagers aren't believed, and then they have to just figure it out for themselves, and they have to often are coming together. There's even one that it's they're in psychiatric hospital together, and they have to start working together as psych patients through peer support to fight this supernatural monster that's after them.
Yeah, and it's empowering to see that, whether it be like, even if it's a fake thing about a monster in your dreams, it's connection at the end of the day.
Have you ever seen that website, Does the Dog Die, where you can ask? It's a database that will tell you any kind of triggers that you might have for any film. And it'll tell you, are there spiders in this? Is someone, is there a psychiatric hospital? Is there, you just check all these different triggers. Have you ever seen that?
Yes, I have. And it's a great resource because I've used it with my friends before we watched movies.
How did you know that it was a positive thing for you to be checking out the horror movies? And are you afraid that one day you're going to regret having all those gruesome, horrific, violent images in your young, developing brain?
There's definitely a time and place, but I was the kid who was like, let me learn about fake blood. So there's always like that knowledge of how it's made. Oh, that's corn syrup. Cool. So I think there's a bit of a disconnect for me, but I understand that there's not always that disconnect. So number one, learned it about what it is before you do it. Always learn about something before you do anything.
Can I just say how much I love this conversation, because I really don't like it when people say, "Oh, you should never do this or you should never do that. This is going to hurt you. This is not a good thing." And we're finding out, hey, it's not that simple. Like, it actually might be super helpful at times. It might be something to avoid at times. And I think that goes along with a lot of the other healing ways that we have. So I have a question. I love that mix it in the horror. That's amazing. I'd like to shift to, there's probably a lot of older adults listening, maybe some that work with youth.
You mean like you and me, are we older adults
yes.
now, Oryx? I mean, wait a second. How did I become an older adult?
I know.
That's
What
depressing,
happened?
man.
What happened? What happened, Will?
What happened?
So could you talk about some of the pitfalls you've seen, like some of the mistakes you've seen that older folks have made in trying to work with youth, and maybe some of the ways that you see are better ways to go?
I know one of the biggest things right off the bat is just kind of assumptions. There's like a way of like, well, we're the grown-ups. We've lived more life. We know what's best. And this lack of like, hey, youth, what do you want? Which can be really difficult in both scenarios, because you're sitting there and you're like, but I think this is what they need, and it's not working. And you go through this cycle of like, this is what they need though. And a better way is just asking. I talk to my mom a lot about this. Gender identity and sexual orientation is very new to her. So she asks me questions about it, being the resident young person in our house. And I think that's very impactful, that instead of just assuming she knows what's going on, she comes to me and says, so what does this mean? What is this about? How would you react if this happened to you? Instead of just like, yep, know what's going on. And then there's also this like idea of what's best for you, but how do we get that going and get that in the rhythm with you guys maintaining involvement? And I think they can tend to lean towards, well, let's just run this, and they don't really try to make it accessible for them. They run it how they see has worked for adults in the same types of situations, when that's, as I've learned through youth curriculum and creating that, is not always what's going to be best. Youth-led is hard, but it's so powerful, and you will get so much more involvement in activities when you're thinking about youth engagement and when you are actively using it.
Felicity, if people want to get in touch with you, how could they contact you? And also, can you give the information about the organizations you've been mentioning, ECPR and Youth Move? And
Yeah, so I am contactable with my email, ftkrueger1@gmail.com, and then on Instagram, Felicity is not okay. That is a joke, I promise. And then just Google me. I'm very easy to find. There's not that many other people with my name. Youth Move National. If you just look up Youth Move National online, they have their website, and it has all the information that you could ever need.
Emotional CPR has our own website, Emotional-CPR.org.
Felicity, thank you so much for joining us on Madness Radio. Oryx, thank you so much for co-hosting.
Thanks for doing this with me, Will. I hope we do it again soon.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Felicity.
Thank you so much. Yes.
You've been listening to an interview with Felicity Therese Krueger. Felicity is a mental health survivor who works for Youth Move Kentucky and is a trainer in emotional CPR who helped develop the youth curriculum. Felicity recently won the Alternatives Youth Leadership Award. That's all the time we have on Madness Radio. Thanks for tuning in. What does it mean to be called crazy in a crazy world? Listen to Madness Radio, voices and visions from outside mental health.